Hi, Sue Borison here with Your Teen Media. And I'm very excited today because I'm going to be talking to Katie Hurley, author of No More Mean Girls. And today we're going to talk about, a version of that, which is all of this online socializing that's happening for what seems like every girl, but most likely is not. So, Katie, tell me what you're up to since we are quarantined.
Well, I actually moved my entire private practice to Zoom, everybody's in Zoom University, and all my clients are in Zoom therapy now. So that's the good news. I'm able to keep up with my kids and teens and give them a chance to talk through this stuff because this is really hard for, I think, everybody at every age. So, I'm doing that. And last fall, I actually put out a book called the Depression Workbook for Teens, which is kind of has lots of different exercises to help teenagers get through hard times. So a lot of them tell me they're actually finally opening that now because they're bored and they're isolated and they're a little lonely right now.
That's great. Okay, so that takes us nicely into the conversation about girls and the whole social dynamic of girls from middle school to through most of high school can be so challenging and so painful. How are you thinking that this at-home experience is for the girls who might feel socially isolated? Is it exacerbated by this, or is there some sense of freedom of being away from that?
Well, I mean, what I'm getting from my girls that I talk to every week is a little bit of both, actually. For some, there's a little bit of a sense of relief that they're home with their families and they literally can't be out with their friends. They can't be left out because everybody's left out. Now, the other side of that is there are a lot of Zoom chats going on. There's a lot of social media hookups happening where kids are screenshotting their house parties and, their group FaceTimes and all of those kinds of things. And then they're sharing them everywhere, Snap, Insta, everywhere that they share things. And the sharing is sort of increasing because there is a lot of downtime. So they're using their phones a little bit even more, if that's possible, for teenagers. So it's a little bit of both. I do think when kids are forced to be home with their families, the ones who would rather be out with the friends all the time doing the things because they're always invited are really frustrated. They're feeling really angry and irritated and frustrated. The ones who were left out a lot are feeling slightly relieved that they're not being left out of that stuff right now. But then the challenge becomes, how do you connect on a different level with what friends you have?
So let's work our way down. So you've got what we'd call, well, I don't want to, so there's the group of populars, but then there's also the group of very social kids who,
For sure.
may not be perceived as popular, see themselves as popular. Those group of kids, you're saying there's a loss for them as well right now.
There is. I will say they're doing a really good job of, look, kids today are super tech savvy and they're good problem solvers. So they are doing a good job of coming up with ways to handle it. I'm seeing little groups of middle schoolers who are maybe not that, super in crowd or whatever you want to call it, but they're getting together on Zoom and doing homework. They're doing homework clubs from their own bedrooms together so that they're at least sometimes they're on there and tell me for 2-3 hours. They're not talking the whole time, but they feel like they're with each other, feel like they're not doing everything alone. So that's something that's working for those kids. But they're also missing out on just time spent together. I mean, now we're seeing it. I've been at this for years telling parents, it can't be only social media. We have to balance it out. Face-to-face contact, human contact, this matters. Well, guess what? The whole world right now is seeing that human contact matters, and it's hard when we don't have it.
So I guess it's possible that at the end of this, there will be some recalibration between technology and between in-person, because we will have all OD'd on the
I sure
technology
hope so. Yeah.
aspect of it.
Yeah.
Okay, so the big groups, they're very social. They
Yeah.
are extroverts most likely, and they're out there. And
Yeah.
they're doing fun things. They're having dance parties with their friends, and they're sharing all that information. You mentioned the smaller groups of people. Maybe you have one or two good friends. And are those kids finding it, from what you're hearing, they can find satisfaction online with a small group of kids?
Yes, because kids who typically roll in smaller groups are kind of okay with alone time. They don't get bored. So those are the sort of, maybe not totally introverted, but somewhere in that gray area in the middle where they like a little bit of contact with their small group of friends, but they also find enjoyment being alone, or they figure out how to cure their own boredom. So, these are the kids who are making messes in the kitchen and cooking all kinds of things and, destroying their house with other projects, but they're finding ways to keep themselves busy. And then they are kind of, FaceTiming or, just video chatting on Instagram and those kind of things a little bit to stay connected. So, they're managing the best they can. Nothing replaces hanging out with your friends, and we know this.
Right.
So it
So
is.
let's move down to, and I don't mean it by any value, but down to the girls who might have felt socially isolated before, and they're kind of watching all of this activity unfold. And so we talk to parents. What would you say to those parents? Like, it's so painful to watch our kids suffer like that. And is there room for those kids to make a friend at this moment?
Well, what I say to parents all the time is it only takes one. And that sounds way too simplified and it sounds like it would never work, but they really just need one connection. So if you have a girl right now who just, if for whatever reason, wasn't making connections at school and really doesn't feel like they have that friend, you have to kind of think outside the box. Do they have a slightly older cousin who they can FaceTime with a little bit right now, just to have that sort of out of the family connection where they can talk about, middle school teenager things, talk about their families, talk about how annoying mom is because she's making me clean the room all the time. Those kind, they just need that one sort of connection. So is there a cousin? Is there, an old friend from an old neighborhood? Who is that person that they can connect to? I mean, years and years ago, we had pen pals when we didn't have anybody else. So we don't do pen pals anymore. But that doesn't mean that we can't make connections with other people. So they really just need that one friend. And sometimes those kids need a little push. Sometimes they do have the one person, but they're afraid because maybe they've been burned by girls all year and they're afraid to try. They're afraid that that one person they think is their friend won't pick up the phone. I have a middle school client I've been working with all year who finally established that connection just before all this happened. And she said, well, she may not want to be on Zoom with me all day. And I said, maybe not, but you're not going to know unless you invite her to a Zoom hangout. So why don't you just give it a shot? So she did, she tried. And then she said, oh my gosh, we talked for 2 hours. It was so fun. And I don't even know what we talked about. So, a lot of kids are feeling lonely right now. And the ones who appear lonely, it seems really painful for parents. And it's really hard to stand back and watch it. Sometimes they just need that little nudge, like, oh, well, what about that girl, Sarah, that you had sort of mentioned? Do you want to try and see if I can text her mom, see if we can hook you guys up on Zoom just so you can do some homework together? Something like that. Just that little tiny push might help them really connect. And then they might find a deeper friendship because they have to talk and talk and talk and talk.
That's all there is to do right now.
Yeah.
So I think one of your suggestions, maybe there is something to do. You said there aren't pen pals anymore, but there's a virtual pen pal concept. So even if
Yeah.
you had, like, if I have a friend as a mom in another country or in another state, is it appropriate for moms to step in and help those kids who seem socially isolated to try to make a match for them somewhere else?
It is. I think, one thing parents of teens hear all the time is you have to step back and let them do everything alone. And to some degree, that's good advice. But when you have a kid who's profoundly lonely or just really struggling with making friends, if you have an opportunity to help them, why wouldn't you? Isn't that what we do as humans? We help each other out. We're always telling parents of teens, step away, don't hover. But also the flip of that is sometimes kids need help. Sometimes they need a little help getting started and then they'll take it from there. So, for instance, I'm in California, but I have very dear friends in Massachusetts. And if one of my kids didn't have anybody to connect with right now, I would be saying, hey, let's get the kids together on Zoom so they can just let's compare notes. What's it like in Boston? Here's what it's like in LA. So that's just a natural starting point. And I think
I
it's
love that.
perfectly okay to do that.
And also, there's no pressure on that one kid because you're saying two families. Like, let's
Just
do
put
it.
families together. Yeah.
I love that idea. That's great. Okay, so they're feeling more isolated now, especially those kids with less social connections. Is there a reason to say, don't go on Instagram? Like, if it's causing you pain to see what everyone else is doing, but that's the only thing that they want to do, how do we, and I imagine this is more for like more middle school than older, because
Yeah.
our older kids aren't going to care what we think. about that topic? Or,
True. They're also self-manage a little bit better. I find my high schoolers, when they've had it, they've had it. They'll say, "Oh, I'm dark on Instagram this week." They'll shut it down for a week or a couple of days when they've hit their limit. They're learning that there are limits to this stuff, and middle schoolers really don't have that regulation at all yet. I mean, high schoolers still can't quite self-regulate, but they're getting there. Middle schoolers, it's forget it. They're totally a mess under the hood right now. They're just growing and changing at a rapid pace. So we have to remember that.
oh, that's awesome.
And we have to remember that. We have to remember that, right now we have to steer their ships for them some of the time. So, we have to be able to set those boundaries and say, you know what, I know this is hard, but it looks like this is making you more and more upset and making you feel more and more lonely. Let's shut it down. What can we do instead? Let's come up with 3 things we can do instead. I'm with you. I know I'm not your first pick. I get it. I'm the sub, but I'm willing to sub in right now. What do you want to do that'll be fun that we can do together that can take our minds off it? I think parents need to talk about how hard this is. Even like I've had it with Facebook this week. It's like I've reached my limit. I'm done. I need to take a break from Facebook. I need a break from the news. It's all hard. Middle schoolers, even the popular, the so-called popular kids, if they're not in on that Zoom conference that gets the screenshot that's all over Snap, they feel bad too. So it's not like they don't get hurt by this stuff, because they absolutely do. And sometimes it even happens more often to them because they're in all these groups. They get moved out of a chat because there's suddenly too many, and you just get poof moved out so someone new can come in. This stuff is hard for all of the middle schoolers right now. So as the parents, we have to set limits and say, you know what, right now we're on break from this right now. Let's do, these 2 other things first before you can go back and check back in. We can't teach them healthy limits. How will they learn?
Great point. Does it help for a parent to say adults also feel left out and get hurt, or do they just roll their
Absolutely.
eyes at us and say like,
Some of them are going to roll their eyes, but honestly, empathizing and saying, I mean, here's what I always say to parents: don't hijack their feed. When someone comes into your Facebook feed and you've got this like post that you worked really hard on, and then somebody else starts taking it over with their stuff. So, when your middle schooler comes to you and says, I feel really left out, I'm not in any of these screenshots, like these pictures are all over, why am I the only one not invited? Don't hijack their feed and say, oh, let me tell you about the 3 times that I wasn't invited and how painful it was. But empathize, yes, and say, you know what, I do know how hard that is. I've been in a similar position, and I know what it's like to be the one left out, and I wish I could fix it for you. I wish I knew what to do to help. All I can do is say, I'm really sorry. I get that it's really painful. You have every right to be upset and hurt and mad right now. Those are powerful words. Middle schoolers, they want to be seen. They want to be heard. They want to be understood. Meet them where they are. That's the best that we can do. Meet them where they are. Empathy and compassion go a long way.
now I would say that lasts for everyone's full lives. That's all we want.
Yes. Right.
It may be more
That's
heightened
true.
in middle school,
You're
but
right.
who
Yeah.
doesn't want to hear? I understand what you're feeling.
Yeah.
Okay, so tone is so hard online. Is
Mhm.
there any advice on how we coach our girls in particular to avoid like misinterpretation? Now, I know it's happening in the news every single day, so adults aren't so great at it either, but do you have tips that you give kids?
Yeah, no, adults are terrible at this, actually. I mean, sometimes worse than kids. So I tell kids all the time to follow the 3-minute rule. So create your post, but don't hit publish on it, whatever it is. If it's Snap, if it's whatever it is, create it, but don't hit publish. Just shut your phone down, set a timer for 3 minutes, walk away, do something else, go outside, get some fresh air, come back after 3 minutes, reread it. And then say to yourself, is it useful? Could this potentially hurt anybody? Is it going to help anybody? Is anyone going to feel left out? Do like a solid gut check. If they can't answer those questions, if the answer to that is, well, that person might feel left out because she's not tagged in it, or this might hurt this person's feelings if they read it this way, then, delete it and try again. We get as many tries as we want, but when we hit publish, it's out there forever. So that's kind of my number 1. And then number 2 is, and this happens all the time with middle schoolers, where they misread somebody else's post and they take it very personally, and then the other kid says, it wasn't about you, or that's not what I meant, or I was just joking. Our jokes fall flat when we're only putting them in 160 characters or less sometimes. So it's really, really difficult. So I always tell kids, if you're reading something and you're not sure, and you have a person like me in your life, text me. and ask me, send me a screenshot and say, what do you think this means? And they'll do it all the time. What do you think this means? And I'll say, oh, I think it means, something funny, or, ooh, I don't think that that's very kind. What should we do about that? So ask an adult, ask a big sister, ask a cousin, ask somebody else to help you read between the lines, because we don't always, when our emotions are high, when we feel like we're under attack, we don't always read things the way they're meant to be read.
Well, we bring the history of the relationship into that one
For
sentence.
sure.
So
Yeah.
do you encourage, like, I think it's really hard to be snarky on and
I
social.
don't encourage sarcasm or snarkiness for middle schoolers on social media. First of all, most middle schoolers don't know sarcasm. They think they do. They think they know how to do snark and sarcasm, and they actually really don't. So they say these things that are very literal and hurtful to one or two people, and then they're like, "No, I'm just kidding," and they try to get out of it with a "just kidding, JK." And that's not how it works. So, to use sarcasm in a funny way, you have to be really sophisticated, and they're not there yet. They don't have the growth and knowledge yet to really pull that off. So I usually tell them not to do that, to be very direct, to be caring, use social media for good. When kids use it for good, when they learn to put positive things onto social media, it spreads like wildfire. I see it all the time when they just shift their thinking and say, hey, I'm going to do something positive. But when they choose to do negative, a lot of people get hurt. There are ripples, and they run beyond your own feed because things get shared and shared and shared and shared, and the ripples run deep. So we have to be careful. And I usually tell them, don't make those jokes, because I guarantee somebody's going to take it the wrong way.
And do you think a parent can articulate that in a way that a kid would respect and understand?
I think parents can say, oh, I get it. I get it. I get the joke you're making. Let's think of a way to say that in a more obvious way so everyone will get it. It becomes more about talking to them on middle school level. Like, oh, I see what you're doing there. How can we make that sound so that every single person who reads it will get a laugh out of it? Like, just rewrite it a little bit, tweak it a little bit. Is the problem is we come at kids and we say, no, you can't say that. Erase that. Don't do that. You're doing terrible things. They're not meaning to do terrible things most of the time. Sometimes they are, but most of the time they're not. So we have to come at them in middle school lingo and just say to them, like, well, what do you really mean by that? Oh, okay, cool. Write it that way. That'll be funnier.
Okay, that's great. What's happening now with online bullying? Is that heightened during this time? Are you seeing your
I
clients?
mean, haven't seen any, specific statistics yet to that, other than we know that racism is, of course, on the rise because of this, because of words that are being used to describe the virus and things. So we do need to talk to kids about that. We need to talk to middle schoolers very directly about the words that they use. Middle schoolers love Reddit. So they love to cruise through Reddit for memes and things and misinformation. And there's a lot of misinformation there. So I'm cautioning parents to really talk to, this is a great, hey, we're all stuck at home. Here's your opportunity to talk to your kids about what they're consuming online and what that means, because we have the power to make a difference, specifically with racial bullying and racism, because kids, they digest things and they don't always put two and two together about who it's going to hurt. So that's one thing we have to be careful about. I haven't seen any brand new statistics in terms of online bullying. It stands to reason that when kids are home alone and bored and sometimes feeling hurt and sometimes feeling left out, things are going to happen.
Yeah. Okay, so parting words. What advice would you give to parents of middle school girls right now to help them, get this through this really unusual time, and get through it as a family, but also helping our middle school girls get through it well?
Yeah. I think that I have a middle school daughter, I have a seventh grader, and what I say to her every day is, this is really hard. You are handling this with grace. I'm here for you. You're allowed to be angry, anxious, worried, upset. You're allowed to miss your friends. You're allowed to get cranky about that. All of those feelings are normal and okay. And it's really, really hard to be trapped and to not get to see your girlfriends. I know you feel lonely sometimes. Please talk to me. The more you talk to me about it, the more I can help you through it. One thing I'm seeing right now with parents, and rightfully so, look, we're all trying to work from home. Our kids are going to Zoom University. We're managing, multiple things at once. It's very, very hard for all of us. I am seeing parents, their fuses are very short right now. They're really feeling like they're going to blow at any moment. So we all have to acknowledge that. And I have learned to say to my own kids at times, you know what, I'm hitting my limit for whatever reason. I'm stressed right now and I have to go outside, or I have to go for a run, or I got to just sit outside in the backyard for a minute and take a breath. Come with me, don't come with me, but I can't talk right now. I have to decompress right now. I think parents need to be able to do that and to teach their girls that they can do the same. They should be allowed to say, I need to go take a break in my room right now. That doesn't mean they have to have all their devices in the room and go through the YouTube tunnel, because that's what's going to happen. It's perfect. We need to keep boundaries. We need to keep bedtimes. We need to keep healthy eating. And they're not going to like that. And there are going to be some eye rolling and some yelling, but these things happen. That's parenting. But we can be really supportive, and we can say to them, I get this. This is awful. One day we're going to look back at this and remember how hard we worked together to get through this thing.
Katie Hurley, thank you so much for your time and sharing your wisdom, and stay safe.
Thank you. You too. Thanks for having me.
Bye-bye.